An iron chain bit into a pale wrist. A candle hissed and bent sideways in a wind that came from nowhere. A wedding gown stiff with old lace dragged against the bedposts as the bride tried to sit up. Somewhere down the long hall, a clock began to strike midnight. The chain rattled. The flame steadied. Across the chamber, behind iron bands and a wrapping of yellowed prayer cloth, a covered mirror creaked once on its hooks. The bride froze. She had heard them whisper about this room. She had heard them say no bride of the Castellan line had ever survived the night before her wedding. Her name was Isolde Marrow. She was 20 years old. She had not chosen this marriage. Now something behind the cloth was breathing. Why had every single bride in this great old house always died before sunrise? Stay with me on this one. The east wing of Ravensmoor Manor smelled like wet stone and old smoke. The corridor outside, the bridal chamber, was lined with portraits whose eyes had been scratched out by someone long dead. Servants did not walk that hall after dusk. They walked the long way around, through the kitchens, through the cold pantry, through the back stair. The cook crossed herself twice before she carried the bridal tray up to the door. She set the tray down on the floor. She knocked once. She did not wait. She left. Inside the chamber, Isolde sat very still on the edge of the four-poster bed. Her wrists were bound in iron, joined by a short chain that ran to a heavy ring set into the bedpost. The ring was older than the bed. The ring was older than the manor. The blacksmith who forged it had died on the day it was hammered into the oak. That was the kind of story Ravensmoor kept. Isolde was not a soft girl. She had grown up in a farmhouse on the edge of the moor. She had pulled lambs out of ewes in the cold. She had carried her own father home on a sledge when he broke his leg in the bog. She did not cry easily. She did not faint. She had learned early that the world did not bend for a marrow. 3 weeks ago, the riders had come. Black coats, silver buttons, the seal of the Castellan stamped in red wax. Her father read the letter. Her father went the color of old ash. He set the letter down on the kitchen table, and he would not speak for a long time. Then he said one word. Isolde. Lord Cassian Castellan needed a bride. The Castellan line had always taken a bride from the moor villages. It was tradition, the riders said. It was honor. Her father's debt to the manor would be wiped clean. The roof of the farm would be mended. Her younger brothers would eat through the winter. The riders did not ask. The riders waited. Isolde packed a single small trunk. She left her mother's silver comb on the kitchen table because she did not want it inside the manor. She walked out to the carriage with her head up. She did not look back at the farm. Her father did not come out to watch her leave. Her younger brother stood in the doorway and did not understand. She lifted her hand to him. She did not smile. Now she sat on the bed in the east wing, and she counted the strokes of the clock. 12. The last stroke seemed to hang in the air longer than it should have. The candle on the table beside the bed leaned again. The wax ran down the brass holder and pooled on the wood. Isolde looked at the wax. She looked at the chain. She looked at the covered mirror on the far wall. She had asked the housekeeper about the mirror that morning. The housekeeper had pressed her lips into a thin white line. The housekeeper had said only this. Do not touch it. Do not look at it. Do not speak in front of it. Then the housekeeper had left the room very quickly. Isolde was not the first bride in this chamber. She knew that. The whole moor knew that. There had been a bride in this room every generation for 10 generations. Every one of them had died before sunrise on the night before her wedding. The Castellan men kept marrying. The Castellan men kept burying. The grave plot behind the east wing was full of small headstones with no Christian names on them. Only dates. Only the words Bride of Ravensmoor. The wind pushed against the broken eaves above her head. Something in the rafters answered with a long dry creak. Isolde tested the chain. It held. She tested the iron ring in the bedpost. It held. She tested the latch on the chamber door from across the room with her eyes. She could see from here that the door had been bolted from the outside. She was alone. She was chained, and the mirror was beginning to hum. She did not imagine it. It was a low sound. It was barely a sound at all. It was the sound a wineglass makes when a finger draws around the rim. It came from behind the iron bands and the prayer cloth. It rose slow. It fell. It rose again. The candle flame trembled in time with it. Isolde drew her chained wrists into her lap. She pressed them down hard. She told herself she would not scream. She told herself she would not give this house the gift of a scream. She had seen enough Ravensmoor servants flinch at small sounds in the dark. She would not be one of them. The humming stopped. The room held its breath. Then very softly, the prayer cloth over the mirror moved. Not as if a wind had touched it. As if a hand on the other side of the glass had brushed it from inside. Isolde watched the cloth settle. Her own heartbeat was loud in her ears. She felt the iron bite into her wrists where she had been pulling. She made herself breathe. In. Out. The candle dipped. The shadows on the wall stretched. She lifted her head. And across the chamber, in the narrow gap where the prayer cloth had slipped, she saw a sliver of silver glass. And in that sliver of silver glass, she saw the side of her own face. And her own face in the mirror lifted its head a heartbeat after she did. She felt it before she understood it. A cold ran down the inside of her arms. The chain on her wrists turned suddenly very heavy, as if the iron had remembered every bride before her and was trying to hold her down for them. Isolde forced herself to look again. The sliver of mirror showed her own pale cheek, her own dark hair, the edge of her bridal lace, and beside her cheek in the glass, the reflection of the candle. Only the candle in the mirror was not bending the same way as the candle on the table. The candle in the mirror was steady. The candle in the room was guttering. A small, slow smile moved across her reflection's mouth. Isolde had not smiled. She pushed herself back against the headboard. The chain pulled tight against the iron ring. The iron ring groaned in the oak. The covered mirror groaned in answer. Not the wood frame. The thing inside the wood frame. The thing behind the cloth. The thing behind the glass. She thought of the housekeeper's white pressed lips. Do not look at it. She thought of the 10 generations of dead brides under their tiny stones. She thought of the riders in their black coats. She thought of her father going the color of old ash at the kitchen table. She thought with a strange clear stillness that all of those people had known. All of them. And none of them had told her. The prayer cloth slipped further. The iron bands across the mirror trembled. One of them, the topmost band, came loose at the left side and swung down with a thin metal cry. The cloth slid to the floor in a long, slow fall, like a woman fainting. The mirror stood revealed. Silvered. Old. The glass was clouded at the edges with 200 years of breath. In the center of the glass stood Isolde Marrow in her wedding lace, chained to her bed, staring back. But the Isolde in the glass was not chained. The Isolde in the glass had her hands free. The Isolde in the glass took one slow step forward inside the mirror. And then in the candle's bent yellow light, the Isolde in the glass stepped out of the mirror, through the silvered surface, into the room. She did not know how long she had been holding her breath. She let it out very slowly. The candle steadied. The room steadied. The thing that had come out of the mirror stood on the bare boards of the chamber, in the same wedding lace, with the same dark hair, with the same gray eyes. The thing tilted its head. It looked at Isolde on the bed. It looked at the chain. It looked at the iron ring. It seemed for a moment almost kind. It said nothing at all. It crossed the room with bare feet that made no sound on the wood. It stopped at the foot of the bed. It looked down at Isolde's chained wrists. And it smiled again. And the smile was not kind. Now here is the thing. The chamber in the east wing had been built to hold a bride. Not to keep her safe. to keep her in. The bolt on the door was on the outside. The window above the bed had been bricked up 200 years ago, in the time of the first Castellan, the one the Moor still whispered about. The walls were 3 feet of cold stone. There was no other way out of that room except through the door or through the glass. Isolde understood this in the way a hunted animal understands a fence. Not as words, as pressure. She pulled hard on the chain. The iron ring held. She felt the skin on her wrists tear. She did not stop pulling. The thing from the mirror watched her with mild interest. It did not move closer. It did not need to. It stood at the foot of the bed and it watched, and the longer it watched, the less the candle gave any light. The flame had not gone out. It simply was not lighting the room anymore. The light slid off the walls. It slid off the bedposts. It slid into the thing from the mirror as if the thing were drinking it. Isolde stopped pulling on the chain. She made herself think. She had no weapon. She had no key. She had a chamber pot under the bed and a copper warming pan on the hearth and a half-eaten loaf on the bridal tray by the door. She had her own voice. She had her own hands, even chained. She had her own name. She lifted her chin. She said low and steady, the way her mother used to speak to a startled horse, "What are you?" The thing did not answer with words. It opened its mouth, and inside its mouth was not a tongue but a small steady silver light, like the surface of the mirror itself. The light dimmed. The mouth closed. The thing tilted its head the other way. Then in a voice that was Isolde's own voice, exactly her own voice, the way she had heard herself in her own skull all her life, the thing said one sentence. "I have been waiting for you for 200 years. Isolde did not move. She did not blink. She heard her own voice say those words and felt something inside her chest crack very quietly, the way a thin sheet of ice cracks in early spring. The thing went on. It did not raise its voice. It did not need to. It said that it had been the first bride. It said its name had been Lenora. It said that on the eve of its own wedding, 200 years ago, in this same chamber, in this same lace, Cassian Castellan's great-great-great-grandfather had taken its life in front of this mirror, because his old blood needed a wedding death to keep itself young. It said the mirror had caught its reflection at the moment of its dying. It said the mirror had kept that reflection. It said the mirror had been waiting, ever since, for another bride to chain in this room. Because the curse needed two of them. The dying one. And the seeing one. Isolde found that she could speak. She said every bride. Every generation. The thing said everyone. Isolde said why. The thing said because the Castellan blood is older than your church, and it eats. It eats the women you give it. It has eaten me for 200 years. I am very tired. It was that last part that did it. I am very tired. Spoken in Isolde's own voice. With Isolde's own breath. From a mouth that was not Isolde's. Isolde began to weep, very quietly, without moving her face. The tears went down her cheeks and she did not lift her hands to wipe them, because the chain was too short, and because she did not want the thing to see her flinch. She wept for the bride called Lenora. She wept for the 9 after her. She wept for herself. And underneath the weeping she felt something else rising. A small, hard, slow heat in the middle of her chest. Anger. Not panic. Anger. She lifted her head. She said, "Where is he now?" "The bridegroom." "Where is he?" The thing said, "Downstairs. Drinking. He will come up at the 2nd hour after midnight. He always comes up at the 2nd hour. He always uses the same knife. He always cleans it himself afterwards. He keeps the knife in a velvet box in the library, under the window with the broken latch. The velvet inside the box is dark red, but it used to be paler. It has been stained 10 times. Isolde said 10. The thing said 10. Outside, deep in the body of the manor, a door slammed somewhere far below. Then another. Then a heavy boot on a wooden stair. The thing from the mirror tilted its head as if listening. Then it looked at Isolde. And for the first time, the smile on its face was not cruel and was not kind. It was something else. It was the look of one tired woman looking at another tired woman across a long, cold field. The thing said, "Will you help me end it?" Isolde took a long, slow breath. The boots on the stair were getting closer. She could hear them now even through 3 feet of stone, the way you hear your own heartbeat at night. The candle on the table was almost out. She did not have much time. She did not have any time at all. She said yes. If you are still with me, hit that subscribe button. Then come back. Because this is where it turns. The thing from the mirror moved. It moved faster than a living woman could move. It crossed to the bedpost and laid its bare hand on the iron ring. The iron ring grew warm. Then hot. Then red. Then the iron remembered, the way iron sometimes remembers, that it had been forged on the day a man died. It split with a small dry sound. The chain came loose. Isolde's wrists fell into her lap. She looked at the open chain. She looked at her free hands. The thing said, "The curse needs a wedding death tonight. Without one, the blood dies with him. He must die before sunrise. Not me. Not you. Him." Isolde said, "How?" The thing said, "The same knife. The velvet box. The library window with the broken latch. Take the knife. Bring it back to this room. He will come up the stair. He will unbolt the door. He will see me first, because I will stand where you stand now. He will think I am you. He will come close. He always comes close. You will be behind the door." Isolde said, "And then?" The thing said, "And then you do what every bride before you should have done. And the curse will let me go. And it will let you go. And the women of Ravensmoor will not be eaten by this house anymore." Isolde stood up from the bed. Her legs almost gave. She caught herself on the post. The wedding lace dragged. The chain swung loose from her wrists. She walked to the chamber door. She listened. The boots had stopped on the floor below. She could hear, very faintly, a man pouring himself another drink. She had a little time. Not much. Some. She turned back. The thing from the mirror was already standing where she had been sitting. It had arranged its lace exactly the way she had arranged hers. It had picked up the loose chain in its lap. It looked exactly like a chained bride waiting for her bridegroom. From the doorway, you could not have told them apart. Isolde looked at the thing. The thing looked at Isolde. They did not say anything. They did not need to. Isolde slid the bolt on the door from the inside. It was a small slide bolt, meant for privacy, not for keeping anything out. She opened the door a hand's width. The corridor beyond was black. The portraits with the scratched-out eyes watched her with their nothing. She slipped out. She closed the door behind her. She left it unbolted. The library was at the end of the east wing, 2 doors down. The door was open. A single lamp burned low on the desk. The window with the broken latch was behind the desk. On the desk sat a small box covered in dark velvet. Isolde crossed to it. Her bare feet made no sound. She lifted the lid. Inside the box on stained red velvet lay a knife. The blade was thin. The handle was bone. The bone had been polished by use. 10 brides' worth of polishing. She took the knife. She closed the box. She turned back toward the corridor. And on the stair below, a man cleared his throat, and a heavy boot took the first step up. Isolde moved fast. She did not run, because running would echo. She walked quick and silent, back along the corridor of scratched-out portraits. She slipped into the bridal chamber. The thing on the bed lifted its eyes. It saw the knife. It nodded once. Isolde stepped behind the chamber door. She pressed her back to the wall. She held the knife low against her side, the point turned in, the way her father had taught her to hold a paring blade so it did not catch on her own skirt. Her father had taught her many small, useful things. He had not, in the end, been able to teach her how to refuse a castellan. But he had taught her how to hold a knife. The boots came up the stair. The boots came down the corridor. The boots stopped outside the door. A man's breath, slow and wine-thick, came through the wood. A key turned in the outside bolt. The bolt slid. The door swung inward. Lord Cassian Castellan stepped into the chamber. He was tall. He was broad through the shoulders. His coat was dark and well cut. His face was handsome in the way a knife is handsome. He did not look at the door. He did not look behind it. He looked as he had looked 10 times before, straight at the bed. He saw a chained bride in white lace. He saw her dark hair. He saw her gray eyes. He saw her wrists in iron. He smiled the small private smile of a man who has done a thing many times and knows he will do it well. He took the knife from his own belt. His knife. Not the velvet box knife. A second knife. A working knife. He said gently, almost tenderly, "Do not be afraid, my love. It is quick. It is always quick." The thing on the bed lifted its head. It smiled at him. It said in Isolde's voice, "You said that 10 times." Cassian Castellan stopped walking. The knife in his hand wavered. The candle on the table chose that moment to go out. In the dark, Isolde moved. She moved exactly the way her father had shown her in the lambing shed when she was 9 years old and a ewe had gone mad with pain and tried to bite her. She moved low. She moved fast. She came around the door at his back, and she put the velvet box knife under his ribs from behind, the way her father had taught her to slip a blade past bone. She did not stab. She slid. The blade went in along the right line. Cassian Castellan made a sound that was not a word. His own working knife fell from his hand and hit the boards. His knees folded. He went down sideways onto the floor of the chamber where 10 brides had died, and he died there himself in the dark, in the lace shadow of his own bed. The thing on the bed stood up. The chain fell from its lap onto the boards. The iron ring in the bedpost was already cool. The candle relit itself, very small, very pale on its own. The room filled with a thin gray light that was not the candle and was not the moon. It was the silvered light from the mirror. The mirror was waiting. The mirror was hungry. The mirror did not yet understand that it had just been fed for the last time. Isolde stood over the dead man with the knife still in her hand. Her bridal lace was spattered. Her wrists were bleeding from the iron. Her breath came hard. She was not crying anymore. She looked across the room at the thing that wore her face. The thing looked back. It bowed its head slowly, the way a tired woman bows her head when something is finally over. The thing said, "Thank you." Then it walked to the mirror. It did not look at Cassian on the floor. It did not look at the room. It put one bare hand on the silvered glass. The glass softened under its hand, the way water softens under a falling stone. And the thing, which had once been a girl called Lenora, stepped back into the mirror the way she had stepped out of it. Only this time, when she was inside, she did not stop. She kept walking. The light inside the glass dimmed. Her shape grew smaller. Smaller. Then she was gone. The silver went dark. The mirror cracked once straight across, from corner to corner, with a sound like a deep breath being let out at last. The iron bands fell away from the frame and hit the boards. The prayer cloth on the floor twitched once and was still. Isolde stood very still. She listened. The house was quiet. The wind in the eaves had stopped. The portraits in the corridor were only paint again. Far below in the kitchens, a dog she had not known existed began to bark, and a servant she had not seen all day called out, and a door opened, and the manor of Ravensmoor began, very slowly, to wake up. She knelt down beside Lord Cassian Castellan. She closed his eyes with 2 fingers, the way her mother had once closed the eyes of an old neighbor in the parish. She wiped the knife on the dark cloth of his coat. She set the knife down on the boards beside him. She did not need it anymore. She walked to the bed. She sat on the edge. She looked at her wrists. The cuts were not deep. She pressed the lace of her sleeves against them. She breathed. In, out, in, out. She felt, for the first time since the riders had come 3 weeks ago, like a person inside her own body. By the time the housekeeper unbolted the door at dawn, with 2 stable hands behind her and a priest behind them, the candle on the table had burned itself out properly, and the cracked mirror stood quiet against the wall, and the wedding gown was folded over the chair, and Isolde Marot sat fully dressed in her own riding clothes on the edge of the bed, with her small trunk on the floor beside her, waiting to go home. The priest looked at the body of Cassian Castellan on the floor. The priest looked at the cracked mirror. The priest looked at the iron bands and the prayer cloth. The priest looked finally at Isolde. He had been the priest at Ravensmoor for 40 years. He had buried 9 of the small headstones behind the east wing. He had refused to bury the 10th because the 10th had been his own niece. He looked at Isolde for a long time. Then he nodded once. Then he turned to the stable hands. Then he said quietly, "Fetch a cart for the lord. Fetch a horse for the lady. She is going home." No one stopped her. No one asked her any questions. The black coats did not ride after her. The seal of the Castellan never came to her door again. The house of Ravensmoor was closed by an act of the parish within the year, and the east wing was unroofed stone by stone, and the cracked mirror was buried face down in the moor in a grave with no marker. Isolde went back to the farm. Her father did not speak for a long time when he saw her in the yard. Then he came down the kitchen steps and he held her, the way he had not held her since she was a child with a skinned knee. Her younger brother ran out behind him. The lambs were in the lower field. The roof of the farmhouse was still leaking. None of that had changed. All of that was hers again. She did not marry. Not Cassian Castellan. Not anyone. She lived in the farmhouse on the edge of the moor for 60 more years. She kept sheep. She helped the neighbors at lambing. She closed the eyes of old neighbors in their beds when their time came. She taught her younger brother's daughters how to hold a paring blade so it did not catch on their own skirts. She told them, once, when the eldest was old enough, that a girl should never go quietly into a strange house. She did not explain. On the last night of her life, in her own bed, in her own farmhouse, with her grandniece holding her hand, Isolde Marot turned her head to the small, clean mirror on the wall opposite. She looked into the glass. She saw an old woman in a white nightshift, with thin gray hair and pale gray eyes and very tired hands. The old woman in the mirror lifted her head at the exact same moment Isolde lifted hers. The old woman in the mirror smiled when Isolde smiled. The old woman in the mirror closed her eyes when Isolde closed hers. There was no one else inside it. There never would be again. Outside, the wind moved across the moor, and the lambs called from the lower field, and somewhere far away, in the grave with no marker, the cracked silver in the buried mirror finally went black and stayed black. And in a small chamber that no longer had a roof, in a house that no longer had a door, in a wing that no longer had a wall, a girl called Lenora, who had once been the first bride of Ravensmoor, rested at last. And on the moor the rain came on soft, and a candle in a farmhouse window burned steady and did not bend.